Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play podcast featuring a rowdy group of best friends telling stories together and playing tabletop role-playing games in original settings. You can find the show over on Blue Sky at Risky Standard. You can also find us in the show's Discord, which I'll drop a link to in the show notes. You can always drop us a direct line over at risky.standardpod@gmail.com. But the Discord's a great way to keep in touch. I myself, as America's #1 chip enjoyer, I'm running the Crispy Standard chip-specific Discord channel as we walk the twisted path of the Flavor Warrior. And as always, I guess I shouldn't say always, but as of today, I'm your host and GM, Pete Loftus, coming to you live from a stellar reconnaissance listening post on the edge of ring-occupied space. And today we're going to continue the Division of Silent Accords, a clandestine organization within the Ring's intelligence branch shrouded in myth, called into service to preempt matters of interstellar diplomacy, espionage, and subterfuge, protecting the fragile peace within the Ring without public acknowledgement. The Division of Silent Accords is a side story taking place in the fictional universe of our first season campaign, the Notes on the Imber Conflict. In this side story, we're shifting our camera's lens away from the windblown sands of Imber and focusing elsewhere within our patron faction, the Boundless Ring, the hardscrabble federation of anarcho-syndicalists fighting to build a perpetual revolution into an interstellar union, uniting the disparate and the downtrodden across the stars. If you haven't had a chance to take in Risky Standard's Season 1 campaign, all 40 episodes are now streaming on your long-form narrative genre fiction podcast platform of choice. Prerequisite by no means to enjoy this adventure, but you might hear some thematic concepts and terms thrown around that we've established and fleshed out in Season 1. So great time to hop in there, check that out if you're interested. But if not, we're going to jump in today where we left off. And to continue that story, we're going to pick up with Scum and Villainy, a science fiction setting for Forged in the Dark games by John LaBeouf Little and Strass Asimovic from Off Guard Games. I've got with me Malcolm Hall, returning as planetary archaeologist and xenoanthropologist Dr. Alice Forstall.
Good afternoon.
And Mitch Brewster, seasoned operator and soldier of fortune, Argot Ka'tel.
Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play.
Cut it. Sorry.
Apologies. Sorry, I forgot. I'm actually playing today. Very excited to do so.
And Timothy Manns, a thick-skinned combat specialist and Aurelian enforcer, Bracco Kemmler.
I think I did that last time.
Hey, and if you haven't seen Dracula yet, how's that?
I'm not a man of few words, so when I have to be, it sounds dumb as hell. Yes, I'll be playing as the very strong, very, very strong man, Bracco.
There you have it. And of course, last but not least, we've got producer extraordinaire Liam Doherty in the wings. To kind of give us a little bit of a flashback, by the time the credits rolled on the last episode, we followed the arrival of our 3 covert operations specialists at Provenance Station, a Ring intelligence black site and data repository in orbit around Tenemer 3, currently requisitioned as a command post by the Division of Silent Accords Procurator Bereska Perneb. Perneb read you into the Silent Accords, flanked by the churning and broiling surface of a supermassive red giant star, and briefed you on an encroaching threat from beyond the confines of known space. The threat, of course, being the arrival of a deep space anomaly, a massive object and seemingly derelict hulk with a strange fundamental signature. Appears to be unstuck in thread space, the folded fabric of space-time via the beacons, the silent, monolithic ruins dotting the cosmos, allowing stellar civilization to transit the darkness between stars, slipping between the underlying planes of physical reality and fundamental space. Perneb explained that this anomaly, designated the Aeonian, is believed to have been continually transiting thread space for centuries, making irregular and intermittent appearances in the space lanes, taking on something of a ghost ship status amongst astronavigators. However, the anomaly has recently showed signs of slowing and greater instability, and quite possibly its fuel source may be degrading. The Aeonian's slippages into real space have become longer, its incursions become more frequent, and somewhat predictable along a sort of linear trajectory across the heavens. The next step on its path, right here in the Tenemer system, and if the telemetry predictions are correct, its trajectory will take it directly into the path of the supermassive red giant of Tenemer Prime. Your mission, to board the Aeonian, secure and recover the exogenous material or technology that would make possible a voyage of several hundred years through thread space, a feat currently unthinkable within the limitations of our setting, and escape before the object slips back into fundamental space or crashes into the solar body. And yeah, so today I think we'll continue kind of where we left off in the division of silent accords. When our camera closed last episode, we saw our three, Dr. Alice Forstall, Argot Ka'tel, and Bracco Kemmler, boarding the Arrogant Neighbor, the modified frigate and blockade runner owned and operated by soldier of fortune Argot Ka'tel. And as our camera pulled away from the space dock further out into the system, and we saw the kind of blue-green gas giant as the fabric of space-time kind of distorted, rippled, and tore as this kind of massive space hulk lurched into our real space. We described this last time as being a pretty massive column of seemingly a stone-like structure. The pull in my head is columnar basalt, kind of hard-edged column of stone with this bulbous accretion, which seems to have welled up along one side here, almost like the knot in a tree. What you were able to glean based on some information gathering in our previous session was that the object has been picked up by stellar reconnaissance. And one of the more notable changes is that there's a big gash in one side of this object, a tear in the side of this column. Your initial scans were able to make out that there is kind of like a debris field, which seems to follow it from these slippages between thread space and real space. I think one of the other big takeaways from gathering some information was that some of the images you were able to get a hold of showed that there was at least one other attempt of a boarding by a Concordat scout ship. The Concordat, of course, being the kind of zealous space Catholic faction along the lines of Warhammer 40K, a sort of imperial force seeking to find the demiurge they believe is somewhere out in the heavens and, I don't know, smash open the spigot by which God meters his grace. You gathered some assets. Bracco managed to put together a null field emitter. Alice Forstall did a little bit of kind of sensory data review on a mobile computing and analytic device, and Argo kind of made ready the Arrogant Neighbor. And yeah, I think that's where we'll pick up today. Last time we saw the Arrogant Neighbor kind of take off from Providence Station and start hurtling out into the outer reaches of this system. We had our engagement roll, and I think Mitch's first canonical dice roll in Risky Standard recording history was a tremendous success. You got a full 6 on that, which puts you at a controlled position. Yeah, I think we'll pick up the camera there. We see the afterburners flare on the Arrogant Neighbor. This axe head-shaped frigate hurls itself out towards this gas giant away from the supermassive star behind you as you are coming into this particular planetary trajectory. And I think on a controlled approach, you are coming in here, and I would say you're starting to get like the first pings on the console on the Arrogant Neighbor here that you are approaching target. What are you guys doing?
So I think just to like paint the inside of what Argo's ship looks like a little bit, as we get the camera on the inside, the Arrogant Neighbor is deeply lived in. I think it is like a ship that shows like a ton of signs of repair work all over the place. And I think it is also a freighter. It's a smuggling ship. I think there's like big cargo nets all over. I think the main body is this kind of cargo hold that has been like subdivided into like living areas and like working areas.
It smells crazy in there.
Oh, it smells crazy. I think there are also a bunch of bookshelves in here lined with print material that is like secured in place with cargo straps. But I think there are occasionally just like loose papers floating in the low gravity.
Yeah, Mitch, we are playing a sort of fantasy sci-fi game. You don't have to bring in your actual life into the game.
Yeah, we can be as creative with this as we want. So,
And I think there's also like hidden compartments and like just like storage everywhere, right? I've described Argo already as like having this jacket whose pockets are full of material. And I think his ship is like also a reflection of this kind of like, what if a hoarder lived on a spaceship? There's just, I think, stuff everywhere.
Is it oppressive, though? Because I'm kind of imagining a sort of like space, like bag end. No, it's not cozy?
No, I think it's not
cozy.
Yeah. There's like an actual armchair, and like that is like bolted to the ground and has like a waist strap on it, so you can
I love that. You've got the 5-point harness on like your cozy reading chair.
Yeah, exactly. So there's like this one cozy spot, but it is also otherwise like filled. You know what I mean? Like it's just slightly too much. It's gone from charming to like slightly concerning, perhaps. And I think that the actual command center is in the curve of the axe head, right? That is like where the bridge of the ship is, like seats with like control panels kind of running along the length of this like axe head.
So it's like vertical, right? Like the axe head is vertical, or is it I think we said last time it's vertical, right?
It's vertical, but I imagine the seats are kind of suspended in like a harness.
Sick.
Like,
that's cool.
So it's like you can be piloting, I think, the arrogant neighbor, and you can go from this like vertical axe head to this horizontal shape. And the seat will like positionally rotate you within like the, which is why everything is also secured, right? There's not like free floating stuff as much in here. I think because this ship regularly and violently changes its gravity and its orientation.
I don't know if Bracco's able to sit. Is he able to sit down, or does he have to like brace himself in this space so that anytime it rotates, he just has to like hold himself there?
The ring has like a pretty wide variety of like species and peoples in it. I imagine I've run enough different kinds of jobs. It's probably not a comfortable fit, right? But it is like
He's clearing out an extra chair and has to hold something on his lap.
That's what it is, right? The first chair doesn't fit as we're gearing up. I open down a panel. There is a spare chair, right?
Oh, it's like a Murphy chair. Like it folds out of the console, maybe like pops out big enough for like a big dude. Could fit a Kylexian, Aurelian, any of the big races.
Yeah.
Even Melvin.
Hey.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
So maybe we're like in this kind of bridge, this like cockpit area, big panel full of like glowing switches and like different knobs and buttons, like CRT readout monitors. And on the slow approach in.
I think that's like a good time for as we're kind of coming in here, I think, your hands on the throttle. I think you kind of like see the screen like waver a little bit, like as you start to get this first image of the Aeonian like on the scanner. And it's like it's almost like when a CRT monitor like gets plugged in, like it bounces, right? I think the radio kind of crackles, like, and suddenly it snaps to clarity, right? And Perneb's voice cuts through.
Damn it, Ka'tel. Your lucky Provenance station's running a skeleton crew without a compliance officer. The encryption on the arrogant neighbor's transponder signal isn't exactly standard issue. I don't even think it's legal. Communication spent the last 40 minutes just trying to get a lock on your trace.
Right, I think he chuckles, into the mic, right?
It's important to keep this airspace quiet, Curator. We're on the approach.
And I think it's fuzzy. Like you can kind of hear the static and maybe like some words garbled, but all you can kind of hear back through is like,
listen up. I don't know how long we'll have before this signal frays, but I thought you should know. The long-range sensor array on Provenance Station's picking up bursts of heavy radiation and an unknown fundamental interference from the Aeonian. Pick up your division emblems. You should see it. I left it on board. It's a black enameled box. It's more than just a souvenir.
And I think like you can kind of even get like a little like kind of staticky like hollow image of Perneb. You can probably just make out the silhouette. And she continues.
There's a panel on the back. Press your fingertip into it.
Presumably you're doing that. And I think if you pick up this little badge here, which we kind of described it as an emblem, it's like a kind of same glossy black enameled surface of sort of two overlapping chevrons pointing up and two overlapping chevrons pointing down, and kind of a black ring signet in the middle. And this would be, of course, the emblem of the division itself. She continues on to say,
the apparatus minted these especially for your task. They're fashioned from the use of an experimental fundamental entanglement particle. This interference means we may not be able to communicate directly, but the emblems are tied to Provenance early warning systems. We'll do our best to...
And I think it's like it crackles again here, right, a bit, but you can kind of make out...
Do our best to monitor the anomaly.
And I'm going to introduce kind of an important detail to this mission, which is that this mission is going to be bound to a countdown clock. Clocks are a mechanic in Forged in the Dark games that allow me, the GM, to apply a little pressure to the party trade some position for greater effects, add a little narrative progression, generally speaking, kind of heat things up by time boxing certain events. And so I'm going to add a 12-step clock in this mission that I think we'll call Aeonian Stability to represent how much time the players have left before this derelict hulk either degrades its fuel source or inadvertently slips back into the folded space of thread space. I think on your screen, you're starting to see this noise, like the staticky noise of this interference, even at this distance, the Aeonian, and it's like really garbled here. And you can kind of hear Perneb speaking, but you're kind of just making out clips of words. You think it's like,
be advised, detected in one piece.
And it's starting to fade. So if you want to say something like now is probably the time.
I think I turn off the comms.
Yeah. They call it the silent accords.
I think Argo stands up at this point, and I look over at Bracco, and I'm like, Bracco, take the helm, fly us in. Let's keep it low and quiet through the debris field. And I look over at the doctor, Dr. Forstall. If you could hit the scanners, give us an initial readout of what we're approaching. I want to look for entrances onto the ship, life forms, any signs of active weapons. And I think I stand up and I move to like an area at the kind of back of the bridge where a kind of medicine cabinet opens up on the back wall. And I think this is like a lot of sci-fi drugs in here, right? There's like pills. I think there's also probably like a little inhaler mask with a canister. And I think we see Argo starting to like work his way through this pharmacopoeia. And we see it as like anti-radiation pills, is like wakefulness alert drugs, right? There's like some kind of like canister, puff of the gas, pupils dilating wide and then like narrowing back in. And I think this is not necessarily a mechanical thing, but I think that this old man has like a sort of like small pharmacy of combat drugs back here that he is imbibing in preparation for our arrival as the other two take over the controls of the ship.
And is this like he's just downing, handfuls of this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's like open one bottle. It's like two of these like, I think like luminescent like pills, right? They have kind of like a soft green glow to them. Down. This little inhaler mask, breathing in it, just kind of like working his way through the cabinet of, a kind of a particular mixture of things that he thinks he's going to need on this adventure. Like I said, wakefulness drugs, probably some amphetamines, radiation blockers, some weirder, like fundamental connectivity enhancers, right?
I think the doctor, is starting up the scanner, but turns to see you just putting the kitchen sink in your body, and is going to make a comment. I'm going to say, I don't really think that that's safe to be mixing all of those at once. Don't you think?
I smile, cough right as I a little bit of like nebula
blood
mist comes out with my cough, and I say, Doctor, I've been doing this for a long time, and not all of us are born with the natural advantages for this kind of work. And I gesture to Bracco over at the other control panel. Of course, you've completed your medical training as a part of your own degrees. I'm sure you'll be able to handle any consequences in the field.
Definitely. Oh, thanks a lot. Rolls her eyes, goes back to the scanner.
Are you that kind of doctor?
I think I can do some. It's not my specialty, but like good, I said, I'm more of like an alien doctor. I'm more of like, I think I'd be better off helping Bracco if Bracco got sick.
I had an English professor who was a doctor and was like, I'm not a doctor who can answer questions. I'm a doctor who can help you ask better ones, which is like always the kind of funny intellectual doctor to me. Argo's kind of like loading up on stims here. I think you guys are probably a little uneasy and you're on approach, right? And so on a 6, I'm not going to make you roll for kind of like an initial approach, but maybe kind of talk me through it a little bit. What we found from Dr. Forstall's analysis was that the spectronomy showed waves of radiation emanating from this craft from the blocky, low poly scans that you were able to produce. We can see this big column. There's this kind of basically two main approaches, right? There's this gash that we can kind of see, I think even atmosphere sort of drifting out. And I'd say now, on your kind of main viewport, like you can probably see it, right? In the orbit of this kind of blue-green gas giant, there's this kind of pillar of stone. And I think it kind of brings with it this kind of drifting nebula cloud and like kind of scattered debris field. From your looking at it, it's maybe like 3 inches big on your screen, but of course you're on approach, right? And so I think the big question is, what method are you taking to get on board? Are you going for that gash, or is the idea that you're going to come towards that kind of hangar door?
Well, I think if we're in a controlled position, right? If we are coming in controlled, we have not tripped any alarms yet. Like we're coming in on the stealth approach. We should run a scan first, right? We should, run a scan, see, right, is there activity near that gash? Is there activity near the like more traditional entrance? What is there? Let's just run a full kind of like telemetry of the situation before we make our like final approach.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bracco talking. One of you two needs to tell me more about what these mean. I can handle the ship as long as you tell me what I'm going into. Oh, so Bracco is driving this ship, maybe much to Argo's chagrin, like a stolen ship. That's mostly how he's learned to drive things, like a stolen
somebody
car.
Somebody read the player principles.
Yeah, no, he does. He's spent most of his life taking ships that he had to get them out of a place very quickly. So
you're like a decent pilot.
I'm a decent pilot, yeah.
Spoiler alert, Bracco actually has a higher helm rating than I do when it comes to flying ships.
So yeah, like I would say, with that, right, like you probably can pick this up pretty quickly, right? Like you've probably been in a mix of, shall we say, like liberated freighters and shuttlecraft.
Right.
Fairly standard array here. I think there are probably some modifications. So when you said, if you guys can tell me what this is, like what are you referring
I'm not worried about getting us there, even with the debris field that we're going through. I can get us in there quick and not worried about where, it needs to land. That is all something that could happen. I need the two who know how to read these sensors and specifically what these ones on this ship are going to mean and what that means for the atmosphere and whatever types of life or, other such anomaly might be greeting us when we land.
So I'll say, you're kind of on approach here. We're moving pretty quickly, right? Like the Arrogant Neighbor's kind of a fast approach craft. So we're kind of booking it through this. And I would say, kind of moving the camera ahead as you're talking. You do have the advantage of stealth. So you are not detected as far as you can tell. And you're close now. And you can kind of get your first good look at this thing as we're coming close to this, field of debris and like vapors and mists. And Argo, you said you wanted to kind of run a scan.
Yeah, I think Dr. Forstall's at the sensor station, right?
Yeah.
She, I gestured her as we're coming in. Good doctor. I think you have a better sense of what we're looking for here than I do. Why don't you give us the readout?
Okay.
Oh,
cool.
Yes, of course. Let me get right on that.
So,
do I need to roll?
Yeah, we'll treat this like a gather information roll. I'm just looking at your ship gear, and there's kind of what you'd expect, right? Like we've got pretty basic scanner array. So you have quality 0 in comms. So why don't you roll, Alice, a study roll here?
All right, and I have a very high study roll, so I'm rolling 3d6. It's a 6.
Ooh.
Okay, that's a 6. So on a 6, I think probably like in a big beveled edge, like CRT monitor in the bank of these keyboards and consoles, you have, I'm thinking of like an old radar operator screen, like on a Navy ship, right? Like you can kind of see this ping go out. And I would say that the ping, reaches, and I think you can start to see this like debris field in higher fidelity, like the kind of pixely scan kind of as this wave goes across, like you can see it kind of come in higher fidelity. There's there's, probably like 10 or 15 of these like chunks of rock, some of which look more like they came off of the Aeonian. They're kind of pale, cool colored stone. Some of them are not that, I would say. Like they're like maybe like bits of asteroid. I think you can even see some like hull pieces in here, probably from some other kind of craft. And this would give you like your first good look at the Aeonian. Its hull is pockmarked in craters and like little chunks and like chips off the proverbial block, so to speak. There are, pretty clean lines up to this like bulbous accretion. And this knotty bulk, I would say, is sort of also pockmarked, but I would say they're like deeper and they look more like a hole, right? Like, and so these seem like they're holes, but they're not big enough for a ship to get through. So they're pretty small. And, that's a full success. And so I think like as this radar ping stretches across, you would see a little bar graph, shoot up that would be like beep, 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 like as the kind of it's redlining, right? And I think like as this is happening, on, out of the viewport, I think you can see this like the Aeonian itself kind of shudders, and you see it kind of like lurch, almost like it slips, like skipping off the like a stone on a pond. I think skips forward and a few, clicks. And you see this kind of wave of what looks like radiation buckle outwards. And I think you even see this debris field move a little bit, but not like it's shooting off into space. You see the whole thing kind of like lurch. And you can even see this distortion as it comes from kind of the rear of the Aeonian, almost like the engine is like turning over.
Is the Aeonian responding to our scan? Is it picking up our scan and responding to that, or is this unrelated?
Well, you got a 6. So I would say you're not kind of getting the counter scan, right? Like I'm going to say you're still holding your controlled because you got a 6 on this. So I would say that is probably just a point of like what's observation, right? Like that's just what's going on here. You know that this thing is known to kind of slip in and out of space. Probably not a cause for concern, but you can watch this kind of ripple of radiation, almost like a bubble emanating outwards. And as you're close here, this is it. I've been real generous on a 6. And so
okay. All right.
I'm going to say probably one of the closest pieces of this debris field. As that kind of like red line happens and the pulse goes out, I think you would probably get on the screen movement signature, right? And I think on one of these pieces of debris, you can probably make it out on the magnifier, like if you were to enhance and zoom in, that there is like something smaller than your ship sort of moving on one of these rocks.
Oh no.
But, I'll remind you, you have the advantage of stealth. You're still in a controlled position.
Okay. I guess, I don't know. Maybe I want to, like, say to the crew, I think that there's potential ingress in many places on this, but I've also picked up something a little bit concerning on the scanners in the debris field. Did you see that pulse?
Yeah, so... Yes, I'm looking at the scanners as well. We can't approach through the wound near the burl. That's what I'm gonna call it.
Burl, yep.
That kind of radiation is going to be unpleasant, if not lethal. What are our other areas of ingress?
So there's kind of 2 clear points of entry, right? This sort of hangar door, status of which I think is unknown currently, and this gash in the side. And then your recent scan here picked up like these sort of small like holes in the burl.
The pockmarked holes, but not big enough for a ship. Okay, I'm gonna say there is a gash that is big enough for us to fly into. Atmospheric, conditions inside, I'm unsure. There's a hangar, which I think would also fit us. Also, atmospheric conditions, unsure. I think the hangar is probably our best bet. Do you concur?
I think Argo nods, looks over to Bracco. Bracco, can you bring us into the hangar? But I want to thread near this debris field. I want to get a better visual on whatever you picked up that's crawling around outside there. It's better to know what we're dealing with than going in and getting surprised later.
I think the hair on the back of her neck kind of stands up, but she does agree. She has a morbid curiosity to see what might be waiting for us.
And I think maybe Argo sits down next to Bracco and like pulls up a piece of the console. Like a joystick unfolds and like a sub screen unfurls in front of me. Or a holographic screen like starts projecting in front of me, and this is like the targeting apparatus for the arrogant neighbor's like weapon system.
Oh, cool. I love this image of like the three of you here in this rotating fuselage. Alice at the scanner, Bracco, one hand up, holding himself steady, piloting this, and then we've got Argo behind with this like visor thing. Yeah, so it sounds like you're making ready and you're going to get a little closer to this debris field to start charting your way through.
I can get this ship wherever we need it to go.
Yeah, trying to get to the hangar, but passing by the debris field to get a better view of like whatever we picked up on the scanners.
Yep, makes sense to me. So on approach, this is going to be a helm roll. So that'd be you, Bracco.
Yep.
And I think that pulse of radiation, like you're inside a spaceship, like you're not going to get fried by the radiation, but I think you can see this. And I would say that little bar chart, where that was pinging red earlier, I think you can see is like bouncing in the background still.
Dr. Forstall has not told us about seeing something living on one of these pieces of debris.
I did.
Yeah, she did.
Oh.
We don't have it confirmed it's a biologic. We just know that there's movement, right?
Movement
Yes.
on it. Okay.
I think it's going to be a real scary spider like from that movie Lost in Space. That's my guess.
I doubt it.
Well, if I'm driving Ka'tel, I got to say I am jealous that you...
Ka'tel laughs, shakes his head. Pea shooters. You'd be disappointed.
Why don't you give me the helm roll now as we chart our way through this pulse field?
Yeah, this pulse field,
sort of moving.
It kind of maybe puts the ship a little bit off balance. Luckily, we're in the cockpit that adjusts for the shifting of the axe head that the arrogant neighbor has. I think that kind of just makes Bracco kick into overdrive. Stick shift into like, all right, we're really getting into this. So he's ready to cruise through and is pretty good at doing drive-bys. So whatever we need to see in this field, hopefully we can he can get it real close and weave as needed.
Let's see how good at it you are.
2d6.
Damn,
6.
Okay,
Damn.
6.
This mission is going to be a breeze, baby.
Yeah. So, I think what this looks like, right, as we switch camera to an external view of the arrogant neighbor is like this debris field. I mentioned there were like 10 or 15 of these like bigger pieces, like same way you'd kind of find in orbit around any other large planet you've been to before.
Yeah.
And so, I think the arrogant neighbor's kind of diving and weaving. And you're right, Bracco. Like you've been around a lot of ships. And I think this cool axe head it's very graceful, skirting around some of these bigger pieces, up and under and over some of the smaller ones as this sort of axe head like swivels and tumbles. And if you were to bet, I would say that you haven't even heard a ping, like you've hit debris on the exterior of the hull.
No.
And on a 6, I'm going to say that as you're kind of diving through some of this, right, like you're coming up along one side, and I would say you're probably showing off a little, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny to see this giant dude act so gracefully in a space that he almost shouldn't fit.
You're holding the throttle with 2 fingers and your thumb.
He's driven getaway cars. He's gotten people out of situations. This is part of his life of, crime that does still shine through even after years being in the ring.
And so I'd say on one of these where you are kind of like careening and weaving around, as you're kind of showing off, I think we're pretty close.
Drifting around a piece of this.
Rocks. Yeah, as you're Tokyo drifting through here, I think straight out of the view panel, like you can see this from your view screen right in front of you. As you kind of like veer around one of these boulders, you get a look at one of these, like you spot the movement, right, Bracco? And what this looks like, in these uneven surfaces of these chunks of rock, I think there's even like some metal maybe sticking out of it. There are not just one, but several of these multi-legged structures that have kind of like a bulbous shape on top of these like spider-like legs that are kind of scuttling and working something out of the stone. I think you can even see one of them is using some kind of little laser. You're just kind of floating by here, right? So in a glance, it looks like you're almost watching these little things like
Like a
work together.
bacteriophage kind of thing?
Exactly.
Okay.
It looks sort of like a virus. And so I'd say it's sort of a metallic, like gold color, like gold copper. And yeah, you're piloting this like blockade runner that's essentially running dark right now, and they don't even really seem to notice. But you can see that there's like at least 7 or 8 here. I would say the ones that on your drive-by that are kind of like working something out of the stone are actually working together.
Do the doctor and Argo see it as well?
Yeah,
I
think this is,
it's
like,
visible
right
to all
you.
of us. It's not just something. Okay.
You're probably the one who points at it, right? As you're kind of like doing this like weave thing, but I think it is right there on the screen in front of you. As if
What's with the bugs,
you're showing
Doc?
off as a fly off. So
Can I tell if these are biologics or not?
good question. Why don't you give me? I guess that's like probably a study roll.
Another study roll. Okay. 6.
Damn.
So,
Wow.
sorry, I have to Google how to make this game really hard, really quick. So another 6. Enjoy it, fuckers, because it's gonna get worse. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
As
As soon as we get
not
into
even on
combat,
the-
it's going to be
not
1v2.
even on the
So
ship.
we're enjoying all the gather information rolls while we can.
On a 6 as a study, you are a doctor. You have a doctorate in
Xenobiology.
planetary anthropology, xenobiology. The question, right? Is it biologic? I think sort of leaves you head scratching a bit, right? Because on a look at this, I think you would recognize it as a timid set, right? Like a bacteriophage. It is kind of like in the shape of one of these structures, what we call viruses today, right? Like it is a simple. It has the shape of simple biologic mechanical existence, right? But I would say that it doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have like a mouth. It doesn't have like a face. But they are working together. That would give the suggestion of some kind of like biological origin, at least in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, but there's nothing.
How would you know? That's a better question. How would
I know? I don't know. Do they look metallic? They're moving in a way that looks to me to be biologic? The sheen. They look to have the sort of like a dermis and not an exoskeleton. Maybe they do have an exoskeleton. Like I don't know. That's more like what I'm looking for.
I mean, on a 6, given that this is an anomalous experience, you would you could like open a textbook and say that is a bacteriophage. Like so, technically in that sense,
It's just a large bacteriophage, but there is nothing about it that says that this is a mechanical object.
It does look like it has a metallic sheen. It's almost like perhaps, dear reader, this is a greater question about biological mechanisms and whether those are indeed biological or mechanical.
All right, so inconclusive.
On a 6, I don't want to be inconclusive, so we'll say it's a facsimile of a biological entity.
Is there anything about it, like, are there any obvious like synthetic signifiers? You know what I mean, like lights or like?
Oh yeah. I guess that's
no
another good
no
question,
light.
too.
There's no lights here. It's like operating in the darkness of space. And granted, like this is just a flyby, right? Bracco's piloting took us like in and around, and we all kind of had this like whoa, like look, as we went past it. And I think now you're kind of like back in between some of these like objects of debris, but they looked coordinated. They looked to be cooperating as if they were kind of like on a plan. But again, miraculously, you still have the controlled approach of stealth, so they did not seem to notice you, which is, some indication to the
Doc,
gray
do you
area.
need another look? Or do you want me to keep on track?
No, time is of the essence.
Let's bring it in.
Okay. So, you got a 6. I'm going to say that went pretty well. So, as we kind of approach here, we keep this kind of long, meandering kind of arc as we come deeper into this debris field. I'd say if you enjoyed the luxury of a vacuum between these objects, that is quickly evaporating, right? As like the debris is denser here, you are like, I think now probably genuinely challenged as a pilot to keep yourself from dinging pieces of junk. And I think you can even probably hear that, right? Like the smaller kind of like pebbles and space dust are like tinkling along the hull of the neighbor. And it's at this point, it's a 6. So I'll say as you get closer to this, you can see that not just that object, but the debris field is full of these gold, copper colored, like bacteriophage shapes. I would say that the pieces of debris that look like they're from the Aeonian itself, some of them almost have like a cable. I would say one or two of them have a filament strand of this copper or gold. And, you can see these as you're getting closer. Like pretty much every one of these has this same like accumulation of these. Just because we're getting close to the hull. Give me another helm roll. Make sure we can get through this without anything noticing you. But if you have another roll that sounds better, I would take that too.
No, I'll take helm on this. 4. I hate to be the one to break the 6s, but...
Okay, a 4. So that's a partial. And I'm going to say like that as you come in close here, that like scanner on the screen that was like bouncing on the radiation level starts to spike again. And so as you're getting close here, you can like feel it, right? And if we saw the CRT monitors get staticky before, I think it's like very hard to make out what's going on them. But like the red and the sound of that ding is really, I think, hard to ignore. And everything goes dark for a second. Like as the neighbor tilts forward, like it's yaw pitching. You can even feel gravity give for a second as that like wave. You can feel the pulse. The hair stands up on your arms, and then like as the lights come back on and the arrogant neighbor kind of comes back to bear, you have drifted closer to one of these pieces of like white, seeming like a fragment of the Aeonian, and you're close to it, right? And like I think even before the controls come back, this mass of these, I think you can start to see them sort of climbing on top of one another, and they almost sort of start to form a structure, almost like they're building a tower.
The bacteriophages?
Yes, the bacteriophages.
And as we were flying through, you were saying we were dinging. Are those bacteriophages dinging off of the ship?
No, I would say
okay, they're not like loose and
chunks
hitting
of rock right now.
Okay.
But I would say as you're getting the controls back, right, you can see that these bacteriophages are like sort of climbing up the one before it and like coming up, one after the other in your direction, coming across this filament connecting to these chunks of the Aeonian. And I'm going to set up a 4-step clock to kind of board the Aeonian. If that clock fills, you are going to have a much harder time because you will be fully detected as something trying to get on board. I'm going to click 1 step in that clock right now because the sentinel phages as described here have kind of spotted you.
So this is like a kind of like alert clock, not like a progress clock for us.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess with that kind of alerting, being that first alert kind of being ticked on the clock, are we just trying to kick this? Let's just get to the landing dock. I mean, we're not trying to spend too much time studying these. If I need to, I can whip the ship around again so we get a better idea what we're dealing with. But
this isn't a survey. This is a high level, top priority mission to board the Aeonian and retrieve the technology or schematics for said technology aboard. The field trip can wait. We can study these later if we have time on the way out. Let's get in there now. And I think Argo, presses like a button on my control panel, and we get exterior shot of like panels sliding out as like small like turreted little like gun mounts start to emerge from within the arrogant neighbor. I think these are all like point defense cannons, like these little light flak cannons. They are, like I said, the arrogant neighbor is not well equipped for like ship to ship combat, just like minor defensive actions.
Mm-hmm. In fact, you have a quality 1 in weapons, so that makes sense. Like, right, like kind of just point defense. Like, you don't have like photon torpedoes. You're not going to probably like punch a hole in a freighter, but you can certainly defend yourself to some degree.
And so I think I look at Bracco and I say, bring us in. If anything gets too close, if it seems like they're going to touch the hull, I'll take care of it. But I'd rather not shoot at them if I don't have to.
Is that are you kind of like thinking you're going to kind of punch it through here, just like move quickly?
I think it's now that the stealth is starting to wane, and we can tell that from whatever the sensor. Like Argo said, it's not a field trip. Let's get in there. We have a job and we know what it is, and we're not doing it out here.
I'm going to spend a stress to assist here as well.
Okay.
Because I really want to get on board that ship and out of the way of danger. So I think I'm going to spend a stress, and I think this is like Argo on the guns. I'm not necessarily shooting right away, but I'm like ready to open fire if it seems like any of these things are about to touch the ship itself. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like giving that little extra like cushion of security for Bracco to kind of maneuver.
Okay, that sounds like a setup action. That sounds like scramble to me. To position away from danger, to lift, run, climb, jump, swim, or traverse harsh environments. I think this is positioning yourself away from danger. Any other thoughts on? If no other kind of ideas emerge there, I would say
I was going to just throw it in as like an assist, just spend a stress to give him the extra die on his roll.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an assist dice on a scramble roll for Bracco.
This is a scramble, not continuing to helm. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is like danger sighted. You need to move quickly to get out of the way.
Cool. Yep. Then we got 2 in that as well. Yeah. Let's.
You're gonna get an additional dice from
slash roll 3.
And this I'm gonna say is a we're out of control. This would be a risky standard.
2 6s and a 2,
So
baby.
close.
Okay, more 6s.
So
that's
close to the devil's crit, though. We've
I know.
yet to have one on the show.
Hey, we're gonna get it once we're on the ship, baby. This is just to land and start the fun.
That's
This
a
is
crit, though, baby.
A 6 and a 6. Yep. So I think this in my mind is like these point defense cannons. You know, we have the external shot like metered out. Maybe they even have like a little green laser sight or something. These things don't have eyes, but you can just see the point defense cannons are like trained on them and continue being like zeroed in as you're moving here. I would say, you know, on a 6 curses, you are able to kind of avoid this negative consequence. And I would say, like you talked about this earlier, you're still kind of hearing the like dings and pings of like space debris kind of hitting the exterior of the arrogant neighbor. And from the main screen, like as you're moving the axe head bevel of the front of the hull, you're even starting to hit some of these, right? As they're like going by, which is like they're tumbling over the windshield. I think if we were watching this from the outside as you're moving this like front, like you're kind of like batting some out of the way.
Yeah.
But I do think what you're seeing is that as you're getting closer to this, each one of these kind of pieces of debris is crawling with these sentinel phages. And I think they are all building sort of a tower. And I think even seeing some of them hurl themselves towards your path.
Right.
But on a 6, I would say, you know, up to you, Argo. The cannons can stay cold if you don't want to pull the trigger. But I would say you're seeing a lot of these like coming close, but are either like getting singed in the afterburner or have very near misses or
rotating the ship so they fall off.
Like just so, right?
I think for me, like a critical, is not having to fire the guns,
Right.
not having to do anything to possibly like increase the alert, right? It is like Argo perfectly trained on every time he almost needs to pull the trigger, but then like Bracco's piloting gently moving us in a way where it's like I never need to actually pull the trigger. And also worth noting, because we're in Scum and Villainy, baby. 6s and criticals on a risky roll means we get another gambit.
Ooh.
And gambits
Oh my god, I forgot all about gambits.
Yeah, we got gambits.
So
We got 4 gambits now, baby. Gambits are a resource that represents the accumulation of good luck, weird circumstances, and fate that befalls the heroes of the genre, and the opportunities that can be seized when a crew takes chances. Any crew member can spend a gambit during an action roll to add 1 dice, and only 1 gambit may be spent this way.
So basically it's a additional dice for a roll modifier, right?
We started with 2 because of our ship. We got a third one because I am the scoundrel, and my crew always starts with an extra gambit. And then that critical on the risky means we are now 4 gambits high, rolling deep 6s. So ready for a mission, baby.
As we're just looking lovely today, lads.
as we're doing, as we're doing this, and they're pinging off, and Argo doesn't have to fire. Bracco's
big, heavy.
I think that's the difference between me and you, Ka'tel. You think it's a good day when you don't have to fire the cannons, and that's just a heartbreak for me to hear.
He's a soulful bluesman.
Yeah. Hand on his shoulder, good piloting out there. Don't worry. There'll be plenty of gunfire before the day's over. I have a feeling.
They wouldn't have brought me if there wasn't.
So
Bring it
having
home.
Yeah, I was going to say, so having successfully avoided danger on this approach to the Aeonian, I think, probably some testament to the ability of Argot Ka'tel's, refitted and kind of Frankensteined blockade runner here into something really well suited for this task. At this point, I think you are very close to the actual exterior of this. I'd say, to look in your space rearview mirror, you can probably see like you are probably not in the clear forever. You've avoided danger and kind of outpaced it so far. But I think you're now pretty up close to the hull itself. And just to give a sense of the scale, like this thing is massive, like monolithic, right? Like a space station almost. But this cool expanse of stone kind of continues on. And, by the same virtue, I think that there are these kind of sentinel phages crawling the exterior of the Hulk as well, but they are very focused on this gash in the side. And so as you approach, I think, like the retro rockets flare on the side of the neighbor as you're kind of like adjusting your approach. You can see from where you are right now, right? There's the hangar door, and then further down the hull is this gash. And I would say that the hangar door, from what you can make out right now, is seemingly the same material. It's like a little recessed. This is not exactly like a holographic, kind of like beam door like you see in like Star Trek or Star Wars. This is almost like a blast door. But this thing is derelict. And so what I think you can see is that it easily dwarfs the size of the arrogant neighbor. And it's sort of not quite closed, but maybe like half ajar. And even like there's like a crack.
Turn the axe head sideways and try to slide in.
Yeah, let's go bring it home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is going to be
parallel parking
I'll say
job.
Standard effect. I'm going to say that this is, we'll just say risky standard again, right? Because the impact here, it's going to be risky standard. The risk being damage to the hull itself. The effects here is you're going to be able to get in, but I would say it is kind of a tight fit. So why don't you give me a helm action?
2d6. Watch me fucking smash into this door right now.
Ooh,
2. I shouldn't have said anything about it.
So, oh, come on, guys. You want to brag some more about how good you are at rolling dice? Oh, come on, guy. No, I'm just kidding. On a 2, that is a failure. Things go badly. You suffer harm, a complication occurs, or you end up in a desperate position, or you lose this opportunity. I'm going to say that you start like making your way towards this hangar gap. And, I think as you're getting close, like you can kind of see, like, if this is cool stone, there's not like a raised divot. There's no like bubble light here, but you can see that there's like a couple of like blue lights almost kind of emanating from beneath the stone. And they are kind of dim, sort of flickering. And I think like on approach, you see this door, which the image in my head is like, it's maybe closed on one end, but kind of jammed up on the other. And as you're close, I think you can see it like kind of shakes and tries to close again.
Oh, okay.
Almost like it's like the gnashing teeth of a maw, right? And so I think it's like ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And as you're getting close there, right, like you almost like hit the air brake to stop it. And that I would say like is damage to the hull. I think like you hit the brakes, but not quite fast enough. And maybe that like corner of the axe head sort of gets like mangled here. So unless you have anything fancy and tricky here, I'm going to give you 1 tick on hull damage. And, this is more like if you have another run-in with these sentinel phages, you're going to be at a disadvantage into them getting onto the hull of the ship. It's going to be a place they can pry open and potentially find their way in.
Okay.
So we've not made it in through the door. Is that right?
I'm going to say like where you're at right now is you're sort of stuck. Like you're like wedged into this. Like it was a tight fit. This like thing kind of reshuffled, like it kind of shook in the joint. And like you're maybe like almost like it crunched on one side of this axe head. And so you kind of swung in, but you're sort of in between. And, that's a pretty hard failure. And I would say, like you're half in this door, but you're stuck. And I think that on a 2, like you can also see probably from your like, just perimeter scans that like the phages on the exterior of the ship may have noticed.
Is this door is Bracco's a big guy? Would he be able to power through and try to like crank this,
I would say
the rest
yeah.
of this door open?
I would say if you want to get out of the ship, you would need to put on like a vac suit. But I like that. I think you could probably
like
get out there and free it if you wanted to. That's cool to me. You might need to use like a tool, but you can probably do it.
Before we send Bracco out into the...
we bring this to the team.
yeah. Before we send Bracco...
Go for it. Yeah, I got no problem with that.
Yeah, it's a hostile alien environment. We don't know what those things are capable of, and we don't know how fast they might be able to move. What if I just use the guns to try and shoot? The door is stone, right? It's this weird space stone, but it's like we've seen it chipping and breaking. I'm going to just aim the point defense cannons like at the area of the door, kind of that's like wedging us in, and just try and shake it like free a little bit to give us enough room for you to kind of just ram us the rest of the way through.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is messier, but doesn't involve putting you out in space.
I think that Alice, initially has like some disgust to this plan, but kind of holds her tongue because, also scary situation. We are damaging potentially, Price's archaeological, structures, but I think that, we're going to remember the mission.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I imagine this is like, I don't know how much Dr. Forstall has really like been with brigands and scoundrels and enforcers. But
yeah, not really. Yeah.
So you're like obviously uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think I look over at Dr. Forstall and I can see the kind of dismay on her face. And I say, "Don't worry, Doctor. This galaxy is full of old things." And then I start firing at the door.
Okay, so give me a...
That's probably helm, right? Shooting guns?
Shooting guns? I'm thinking that's probably not helm, right? Like maybe scrap?
I think was the helm fire ship weaponry.
Okay.
Helm of vehicle.
Yep. Makes sense. Okay, yes, you're right. So, give me a helm roll.
It also doesn't matter. I have 1 in everything, baby. I am going to... so what is the position and effect again? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So this is going to put you at a desperate, and I'm going to say standard effect.
That's what I like to hear. Your boy works best in desperate situations. I have a very familiar ability to those who's listened to the first season and are familiar with our good friend Desmond. But I have the Daredevil ability. Whenever I make a desperate roll, I may take an extra dice. If I do so, I don't mark XP, which is fine.
Do I need to mark something for failing? Sorry.
We don't. We mark XP when we roll on dangerous actions, but I don't get to do that because of my Daredevil ability here. Because I am going to take that extra dice, and I am going to spend a gambit. So I'm going to roll 3d6 on this bad boy.
Oh, shit. Okay, I was going to say, I can give you can also push yourself, or I can give you a devil's bargain.
Not a fucking chance. Not yet. We're not even in the ship yet, Peter. Okay. So I'm going to roll 3d6 to blast our way through these doors before the sentinel phages eat us alive.
Okay, Argo, you may fire when ready.
Five. Take a 5.
A 2, and a 5. So, I think you do open fire, right? And like these point defense cannons, I think you hear like a quick report of this. Like, are they? What is it? Are you shooting like slugs? Are these bolts, blaster bolts, gas?
No. I think Argo's real old school. I think this is like material rounds. This is like actual like slug throwers that are punching like dusty holes into this like ancient stone.
So that's a 5, and so I'm gonna say you do it, right? And so you open fire. I think we can like even see these like slugs chipping away at some of this exterior where the hull door is like stuck. You can see it like crumbling and fragmenting as this like part of the hull that's blocked chips and fragments away. Bracco, like you can probably feel the resistance on the controls give, and you punch in. This door, however, I think gets stuck open now. And so you're in, but the door is like seemingly groaning to get back closed. And I would say with the rapport of like these point defense cannons, the fire kind of wrapping. That's report of bullet fire. Like I think that is like when you can start to see from just like your scanners, like those like phage pings are starting to kind of like crawl towards you. Like you can hear them, I think, even from where you are. But you are inside. This like big heavy door drops, and it's not a controlled drop. Like, and I think even just based on the running lights of the arrogant neighbor, like as this door crushes, I think you can even see some of these phages that are beginning to crawl in, like get smashed shut. And I think from the external lights of the neighbor, you can even see these like gold copper bacteriophage legs still twitching or quivering, and even like probably some frantically kind of trying to pry it open and can't, but they're smashed. But you are inside. This heavy door lurches behind you. I think we even like kind of hear the ship screech and groan across the floor here as it kind of comes to a halt. As you enter in, I think gravity sort of sets, right? Like you collide with the floor, and I think on board, there's like a classic shimmy roll from Star Trek of you are holding the consoles as you like slide and skitter into place. I think your lights are the only thing illuminating you at the moment.
I think I shout, right? Like, Forstall, scanners, what's in here with us, right? Like, I'm like switching over into like operations mode.
I guess I do need to do a roll for that.
I mean, what do we see just at first glance,
Yeah, so you slide and skitter your way across the floor here. I think the running lights probably like illuminate a small area around the ship. It is dark in here. It is a large, I think, like kind of high roofed room with smooth walls, long like oval shape. Give me a scan. Why don't you give me like a...
Yeah, I want to know the temperature, what the climate is like, basically. What is the atmosphere? What is the temperature?
Why don't you hit the study roll?
6.
Damn it. So on Alice Forstall's 6 on a scan roll, I think that same kind of scan pulse goes out, and you're able to produce kind of like a holographic, rudimentary sort of map of this room. You can see, the arrogant neighbor. You can see the now slammed shut hangar door behind you. To the far side of the room, there is another door. And I would say like the shape of the room is large. I think does not quite have all the same like greebles and cabling and hooks that you'd expect from like a normal spaceport. Along one side, there are some crates and containers. And I think a little further into this hangar, there is another ship, and it looks long, maybe a little thinner in profile than the arrogant neighbor. It almost looks like it slid in that gap and screeched across the floor a bit further. And there are also like some kind of objects and stuff along the walls.
Like machinery, or like what's like the silhouette?
It's a 6. So I would say there is some equipment that looks like maybe whoever was on this other ship may have set up. Like there's not quite like a forward operating base or anything, but there is some equipment set up.
So equipment that does not match like the signifiers of the aesthetic of the Aeonian.
And you know what? Like on a 6, I would say as this holographic read starts to kind of crystallize, you would recognize the profile of this other craft in the hangar as being a Concordat Chisel class light assault ship.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Looks like they beat us to it.
And you asked Dr. Forstall on your scan, like an atmospheric scan, to see what the environment is. I would say that this has been open to the vacuum of space, but like since these doors have shut, your atmospheric scan can show that the pressure in here is normalizing and there is like a breathable environment, but it's quiet. I think there's no movement aside from the sort of like skittering legs of the sentinel phage that are crushed in the door.
Do we want to toss on some floodlights and really light this bad boy up, or are we still trying to be quiet about it?
What do you think?
Whatever element of surprise we can keep is beneficial to our mission. There's a fortunate turn in them being here first. Any traps that are ahead of us, there's a good chance they'll have set them off already. And I think Argo looks around at the two of you. I think we're going to get more information if we get off this ship and start this mission. We can worry about it getting out on our way out. And I think glancing at Bracco, you're a demolitions expert. I trust you to open that door again if we need to.
I look forward to it.
And I think, at this point, Argo kind of stands up. He picks up this greatcoat that he wears, this kind of bluish gray, like patched up military greatcoat, like throws it on, and it's like a quick, like, wallet, watch, keys, checking pockets.
Which is discussed. You have a lot of them.
Yes, yes.
A lot of wallets, a lot of watches, a lot.
It takes
10
minutes to get through all the pockets.
I'm just checking for the key items, but it's like real, like, let's get going, boots on the ground time.
Bracco is also doing that, and it's all guns.
Yeah. And I think, I punch in the code to lower the exit ramp from the ship, right? We hear the of, like, the hydraulics as, like, the ramp extends and, like, a door opens to grant us access to the interior of the hangar.
So I think cut to, like, an external shot, right? This is a big, dark room. I would say the floor and ceiling is the same cool gray stone that we saw from the exterior. There are no seam lines in here, right? You can see from the floods as this ramp extends. Taking your first steps, I think you have, like, flashlights, presumably, right? And
oh, yeah.
I think searching this, the ceiling in here is pretty high. And I think with that atmosphere filling the room, there's, like, even a thin fog, maybe mid-shin, in this kind of room here, kind of dissipating.
I think, the first thing I want to see is probably the enemy, like, this, like, lab station they've set up, right? Their equipment, right? Like, yeah. Is there anything there that'll give us more information about how many people there are, what they've brought with them? Did they find anything already,
Mm-hmm.
So I think Argo starts marching through the mist swirling around, like the coat fluttering at the base, right? Flashlight in hand, kind of marching towards this, makeshift kind of forward operating base, like lab thing they've gotten set up here.
Bracco is also following, and Argo might be going to look at what they left behind, the Concordat forces. Having grown up in, like, a mining world, Bracco is trying to see, is this something that was dug out by something? Like, was this mined, or was this like an abscess that, like, exists within this ship as, like, it is a natural...
Oh, smart.
Yeah,
like a natural
question.
thing. Like, is there someone who made this space that we're in now? If it can...
give me a
there's
study
anything
roll.
we tell. Okay.
That's pulling on your background. You've seen a lot of constructed environments. You tell me.
You might not believe this, but the muscle guy is not a big study guy. I'm trying to see, is there a way... Nope, there's not really anything I got that can be swung. Be like, historical, or... So he's just gonna give it the old-fashioned...
So this is a study roll. This is technically kind of a gathering information. You could push yourself, taking 2 stress, or you could accept a devil's bargain here.
Nope, I'm purely just trying to see
all right,
what I can
then,
get. 2d6, take the worst, right?
That's right.
A 2.
Yeah, on a 2, that's a failure. There's no consequence because you're gathering information, but I would say, like, on a 2, Bracco, you're mostly muscle. I think you would be pretty confident that this was milled and designed by a brilliant architect working in stone.
It's just dark in there too, probably.
And maybe you're even like, this floor, I think if you, like, put your hand on it, maybe you are, right? Like, it's, like, very smooth, but to you, maybe that reads as perfectly milled. Like, this was a very crafted stone grounding.
Okay.
If it is constructed, it's at a level of masonry that would be, like, pretty phenomenal to you. And so what about you, Dr. Forstall? Are you joining these two off ship, or are you staying on board? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm all suited up. I think I described my outfit in the last one. But I'm going to run over and examine some of those sentinel phage limbs that were cut off.
And yeah, I think Argo hit the note I was, like, thinking of too, which is, like, as your boots kind of disturb this, like, layer of fog as you're kind of stepping through and starting to take your different paths. I think that bluish light that almost looks like it's coming from behind the stone. Again, there's, like, no bubble light. But along the edges of this room, dim lights probably flicker on or have this dim glow so that the illumination in this room is really kind of, like, at this foggy level. And so from this glow of the fog, I think you can start to get a little better shape of the room. So I'll start kind of in order. Argo, have you seen a Concordat ship up close before?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Many times.
Many times. Okay. So then you would know a Chisel class light assault ship like this is usually not operating alone. This would be something that was probably like jettisoned off like a landing craft, but it does have some light armament. The Concordat itself is known for being a bit garish and ostentatious. The outside of this thing is sort of lavishly crenellated, right? Like there are a lot of like exterior details, big blocky shapes, but they are like ornately detailed. I think it is even etched in scripture. There is kind of like a dull sand goldish color to it. It's not exactly glinting. You can see that this took a much rougher landing than you. There's even like a gouge cut into the floor. It sits sort of on its side. Its landing ramp is like overextended. It's a kind of a weird angle. And you can see it looks like this has actually been here for some time. And I think as you kind of like scan your torch across this, there is kind of this like rudimentary lab setup. I think there like are a couple of these definitely Concordat made, like a stack of crates, and on top of it is like a big blocky kind of DOS screen computer. There are even the snub of some candles that were burning at some point over top of like a scroll, maybe off the computer. And I think you even see some bodies in Concordat uniform slumped against the wall.
Oh.
I'm going to pivot over to Forstall.
Yeah.
And so, Alice, in your past as an archaeologist, have you been in a precursor ruin, anything old like this before?
Yes, certainly have. I don't think she's been in anything that is functioning.
So I would say
to this scale, I should say.
Mm-hmm. And so on your study roll, you were working the scanner, and that's like on the arrogant neighbor. But I would say based on your own expertise, right? Just on a cursory glance. One of the things that I think would probably jump out at you in this room is that even kind of factoring in the age of a ruin, of one of these precursor ruins, of maybe whoever built the beacons, this interstellar civilization that we see glimmers and murmurs of the first era, what is here does not strike you as particularly familiar. Probably to your trained eye, this would come across in that there are no pictoglyphs or symbols, even like the stuff that's not well understood for the Rosetta Stone that we're missing in the first era. There's really nothing on the walls, which would probably strike you as unusual. And so you're going to check out the remains of these sentinel phage?
Yes.
Okay. What are you doing to do that?
I'm going to look at them.
So what does that like normally look like for someone with an archaeology or anthropology background? Like what are the kind of things you're looking for as you get closer?
Well, I guess I just want to get a sort of more up close general description,
Sure.
what kind of fluids are leaking out of it?
Yep.
I can't do too many deeply scientific things. I definitely want to get a sample.
Yeah, I love. You're like, well, I guess I can't really run all this, but I've got to get a hold of this.
I can take a sample back to my laboratory, and I can get a better look at this under the microscope.
So as you approach, these hangar doors are like dwarf you, right? Like they're for probably a spacecraft that's larger than the arrogant neighbor. It's a big door, right? It probably looks like it closed right in the middle at some point, but now I think the closure is sort of angled funny and maybe like a little over your head. And as you're getting closer, you can see these legs still twitching of a couple of these bacteriophage that got stuck. And why don't you give me like a...
Doctor is for doing science. I don't know.
Oh, that could be a doctor role. It depends on what you're trying to do here, but I would say like if you're trying to understand the material or like get a sample, that's probably a doctor.
And that's a 6. And I am, I'm getting down. I think I'm taking out like a, I'm not touching it with I'm not even touching it with like a glove. I probably have like a sort of like maybe like a retractable
cool. Mm-hmm.
Stick. Because I don't think there's like a stick to poke around here. But maybe it's like a retractable stick that I pull out with a sort of sharp point. And I am like, poking, dissecting. I'm taking out a tiny little vial and trying to get some like liquid inside of it. And then like putting a stopper on it and then like writing a label on it and putting it in my backpack.
I can see you know your science as well. That's, of course, one of the first principles of the scientific method. Find a stick and see if you can poke at it. And so you got a 6. I would say that as you're getting closer, this is probably like maybe a 3 or 4 foot limb that I think is long and it is smooth, almost perfect, of this coppery gold structure here. I think you can probably see up to the joint of this limb, and it's still kind of like twitching, trying to like scrape at where the like door closed, but it is clearly flailing. And there is a similar colored material dripping from the closure in the door and like dribbling down the side of this door. And on a 6, you're able to kind of produce a sample here. I think like kind of scooping up some of it and like dripping it into, I don't know, what's your sample container? Do you have like a cool sci-fi sample container?
I think it's just, there's a thin sort of hard case. I open it up. It's padded. There's glass vials and containers inside.
Okay.
I pull one out and take the sample. And then I put like a fresh paper label on, jot a, quick note down about what it is that I'm taking. And I put it back in the case. I shut it up.
You scoop some of this up and you get it into this sample container. I'm gonna say it's like kind of like a tall boy size, right? Like more substantial than just a droplet. And, this is a science fiction universe. Let's say it's like it's in a suspensor field, right? It's not like stuck on the sides of the glass. But this fluid, are you familiar with cesium? This is, of course, atomic number 55 on the periodic table, cesium. It's a soft metal, and at room temperatures, it's a liquid, but it can crystallize. And so the pull in my head is like cesium, and I will drop an image in our chat. I'll post it in the show notes too, of this cesium. It's a liquid, but I would say when it's in this container, you can see that it is fluctuating in its shape. And so it's sort of breaking between crystal and fluid, and it sort of concretes itself and then molds back to form and structures again and molds back to a liquid. And I think almost like an amoeba, this sample is sort of probing at the edges of the container. Bracco, what about you?
I think he's light on the tip of the gun, comes up behind the doctor and, can I eat it?
I mean, I'm sure you could.
Doctor, I'm kidding.
Oh, I see.
Kicking at the leg.
Very, very funny, very hilarious joke.
What can you tell from this? Is there anything that's going to knock these bad boys out? I want to know so that when they come, and if they do, I can hold them back.
They seem susceptible to any normal ballistic damage. Any special weaknesses, I couldn't tell without further research.
And I would say, like on a 6, as you're looking, Bracco, this door probably has a handful of these things crushed in various positions. You can see a couple of these other legs sticking out.
I want to step on one.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, one of them I think has the bulb of like a bacteriophage, kind of half crushed here. I think it's like strained and sort of bulbous, but there's stuff kind of stuck in this door. If you want to I
don't want to step on the bulb. That seems too dangerous. But I think it's, one of these legs. It's like jittering about, and Bracco doesn't like that. And it's kind of like you crush it so it stops moving. Wipes his boot off.
Sure. Yeah, maybe like this seam in the door kind of comes down, and I think one of these legs that's maybe just sort of extending and retracting, like you can probably crush.
Yeah, just stomp on it.
And I think as you crush it, you notice that as you step on the limb, it like leaves sort of like a liquid boot print in the same like gold cesium kind of structure. Any other questions here? And I add to this, right? Like you are in this kind of like room filling with atmosphere, and it smells like old, like it's cold in here. The air is stale. It kind of gives that smell of like a house that hasn't been walked in a long time. It doesn't smell bad, but it smells like a bit weird. You can almost like even feel like, it almost feels like there's a breeze towards this door on the other side.
Is the fog that's like swirling around the floor with that breeze, is it like being drawn somewhere?
Yeah, I would like say it doesn't look like it's being drawn anywhere, but like the fog in here is not exactly still. Like it is moving a little bit, and it is kind of moving in the direction of that antechamber. The door further into the Aeonian.
Okay, well then after leaving the doctor and smushing one of the the sentinel phage legs. Bracco returns to Argo. We ready to
just be
move?
clear, I have some concordat bodies in front of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the concordat bodies.
So maybe when this plays out, I think I do two things. One, I think I whistle quietly, and a piece of the arrogant neighbor falls away from it, but before it hits the ground, it stops hovering, then lifts up and starts to move towards me. And I think this is kind of like a miniature version of the arrogant neighbor. I just remembered that we have this, so I wanted to make sure that we throw it into our fiction before we get too far. This is the recon drone that our ship comes with.
Yes.
A small drone for surveillance, mapping, and intelligence gathering. And so, yeah, I think it is also, it kind of looks like this little, like, smaller, kind of like polygonal axe head. And as it comes near me, I think I make a quick gesture on like the little command pad in my hand, and like a floodlight from it shines down on the bodies in front of me. I think this is probably the point where Argo yells out, "We've got bodies."
So the recon drone here, I think, scans over and chimes. Is it of a name? Like, do you personify it?
No, this is just a DF-19 delinquent model. Probably just call it the delinquent for short.
Yeah.
You said it looks like the arrogant neighbor, but smaller.
Yeah. It's like a little mini.
That's fun. Little mini.
Yeah. It's like, it's like its little head is like a dog cocking its head, like when it's like scanning stuff. The
that's fun.
head like turns to calculate here, and I think it even has probably like a laser level, like a line here, right? Is it like is like kind of scanning the room? You can even see the mist lighting up the laser, and I think it does like zero in on these bodies. And I would say there are 2 or 3. I'll say 3, 2 of which I think are kind of slumped by this like console. I think the console is like hooked up with a couple of like big black like tubes that lead to something kind of like a tower PC. That's probably the computational engine. I think there are a couple of almost like rice cooker looking things that sort of like have like a top that fastens, that kind of holds something. And I would say, like, as you are looking at these 2 bodies here, something gave the indication that they had been here for some time. And I think these 2 bodies are in pretty standard Concordat infantry dress. They have like a white ceramic breastplate, gray fatigues underneath. They're wearing like a helmet, but they are almost like mummified. They have been desiccated, like very papery skin, and I think are kind of like against the wall, and probably even have kind of like a thin layer of dust. The door, I think, is maybe another 15 feet further down, and to the left side of the door, being furthest from where you are, you can see another body is slumped over there.
Yeah, I've shouted bodies. I think, I am like pursuing like a cursory visual survey of them. Just like, is it obvious that they all have like gaping chest wounds or, their heads are missing, like that kind of thing. But I think otherwise I am waiting for the other 2 to get over here before I do an actual like examination.
I think Alice is examining this specimen in the glass, and was packing it up. Here's bodies, packs it up even quicker, runs over to where the call is coming from.
I mean, they are near skeletal, but not quite. But I would say both of them are kind of heads back, their jaw like open.
Distended,
I think probably kind of unnaturally wide, not torn off. Like you can see the jaw, but it is wide open, and their heads are kind of tilted back. Their clothing tattered. I think the breastplate is like, there's probably some scratches in it. Hard to sort of tell unless you were to really apply your skills.
Thank God we have a doctor.
Well, they're dead. I place my finger to here for a feel a pulse. They're gone.
Is there any hope of saving him, Doc?
I'm afraid not.
Like, do you want to try and examine these? Do you want to keep moving?
I think,
What are you thinking?
well, I mean, I think we probably should.
Yeah.
Nah, probably not important. We can keep moving on.
Time is of the essence, but we should at least determine
Yeah.
what caused these men, what caused these people to die before we venture deeper into this unknown ship.
Yes, I'm going to say, by the looks, by the looks, these men have been here for centuries in this dry environment. They died almost a millennia ago. I'm gonna roll a doctor or study. I guess doesn't
So
matter,
before you do, tell me a little bit about your forensic approach. Like, what are you looking at on the bodies to like determine what kind of happened here? You picked a doctor, so I'm going to make you talk like a doctor.
Okay.
Like, what is your process?
Well, first, I'm going to try and suss out a manner of death, whether it's blunt force trauma, natural causes, lacerations, things of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to try and figure that out, I'm going to examine, like you said, their jaws look like abnormally large, widened.
Yeah, I'd
extended
say
open.
it's like it's open too wide to be.
So Pete, for the listeners at home, Pete is kind of putting his fingers in front of his nose and then pulling his hands up over his head into his chest, not
unlike the infamous bear trap from Saw 1.
And this is to let
like
you guys
that. Is
know
it like
there's
that?
nothing
Is it
weird
like
happening.
in Beetlejuice, where like their face is like
I
wide
don't
open
think
like
it's,
that?
like, torn open. But if you imagine somewhat of a like near mummified body, I'd say the jaw is like resting on the sternum. Right, like the skull kind of leaned back, the jaw like pulled down.
Right. Okay.
Why don't you give me a doctor roll?
6.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Also, I really would love to get a beat where I shine a flashlight down in their mouth.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which is precisely what you begin to do, right? And I think we get a quick montage here of Dr. Forstall kind of going to work, and the image in my head is like, you described your fit before as being somewhat clerical, like you're wearing kind of gray academic garb, but the rest is sort of like Pith Helm Safari, right? And so with that, I'm assuming you have a sling bag or something with like your equipment.
I think I have like just a regular backpack.
No, it's a sling bag. It's a messenger bag.
Never mind.
And,
it's a messenger bag.
So you have like your backpack and you unload, I think pulling out like a hard shell case, click, pop that open, almost like a pop-up book that folds out to like a small lab setup. And you have your like centrifuge, your test strips, your analytics, whatever. And I think you begin examining this body and clicking on more than just like a flashlight. I think this is sort of like
telescopic light.
Yeah. I mean, you tell me, right? Like whatever this is. And I think like you can see this, and it's almost like the holographic mapping of the drone, but it shines through the mouth of this open skull, and you can see it like the laser sensor probing inside, right? The tricorder from Star Trek is, in my mind, I'm a big TOS guy, so it's like the little tricorder piece as you're kind of probing and checking this out. I think you can even see as you're holding it, that laser continues down the rib cage, and you can almost see it like glow beneath the breastplate. And I think on the briefcase, sort of analytic scan completes. On a 6, what you would find in the readout is that there are no broken bones, there are no obvious lacerations, there are no cuts, tears, or abrasion to the skin, but you would see that this jaw is sort of, I guess I shouldn't say no broken bones, because the jaw, I think here is severed, not broken off, but the bone has separated. And you got a 6, which is pretty high fidelity. You can probably tell that these have been here, by your estimate, a few decades. The teeth in particular come back on the parts per million scan, right? Like the ppm comes back, and based on the sample that you went to collect earlier, there would be particulates, like molecules of this same metamaterial that you saw in this like flexing and reconstituting fluid.
I think I'm going to turn to Argo and say, from what era do you think these uniforms are from?
We said your like analysis is pointing them out as like a couple decades, right?
Yes.
Does that fit with like, I think Argo would know, right? Like Argo is 50-ish years old, but has inhabited a longer stretch of history than that by various means. And so I think it has a decent experience of like the last several decades of what Concordat uniforms look like.
I can interject here. It does not make sense because the uniforms are relatively current.
Ooh, interesting. I think I say as such, these are new Concordat uniforms. Whatever's happening here has thrown off your sensors. These couldn't have been more than a couple years old, right? Maybe there's like, tell me if this fits. The Concordat are huge into like ostentation and ornamentation. Maybe there is like on one of their epaulettes, like, a pictographic depiction of like a historical event, the crowning of like the most recent Hierophant perhaps or something, right?
Yeah.
Something that specifically dates it.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think in our gathering information, you would have seen the kind of grainy images that were picked up from deep space listening posts on approach. The last time the Aeonian manifested in real space was around 3 months ago. And I think like that is probably the indication here.
So these are recent dead.
Something has advanced the mummification process, compounded it somehow.
I think Argo stands up straight, right? Kind of like suddenly. And there's like a shift that goes through his whole posture, right? Almost like a cat when its hair kind of like sticks up. There's a sudden like alertness and kind of a lack of ease that he had going before. And I think he starts to kind of sweep the flashlight across the room and says aloud to the group, but almost like he's talking to himself as much as well, that's confirmation of a recent fatality on this ship by whatever inhabits it here. We are now on high security protocols. Looking at Bracco, you're on Overwatch. Something moves towards us and we don't understand it. I want you to shoot it dead. Doctor, we don't have time to study everything all day anymore. This is high priority. I need you to identify the most likely targets, the most important things for us to examine, and direct us that way. We want to get to the heart of this ship. I think light towards the doorway that leads out of here. I want to spend as little time here as possible.
Well, I think that you would agree, perhaps understanding our surroundings is our best bet for a safe and secure mission. Don't you agree?
No. If we're successful, we can come out of here with something valuable and we're still alive. Every moment we spend in this place not knowing what's around us increases the likelihood that we all come out of here in body bags if we come out at all.
Another eye roll, a huff, closing the backpack, following your lead.
So I'll remind you where you're standing now. There's this site of these bodies where there's this little installation. I think to the right is this chisel class Concordat light approach freighter that is sort of ajar in a weird angle. It is open. And then to the left, about 15 feet, is this other door and where you can see another body slumped over. What do you do?
It sort of seems to me going through the door with the body has a kind of ominous portent to it.
That is seemingly the only exit from this room, based on your scan earlier.
I think, I shine my flashlight towards there, and the drone also follows my motion to orient that way. I think I say, I'll take lead. Doctor, right behind me. Bracco, take up the rear. Without much more preamble, Argo starts to march towards the doorway.
Yeah. You approach this door, and I think the door is maybe 10 feet high. It is very similar to the exterior door you saw, where it's coming towards the middle and closing. It is sealed, and it is sealed with a Concordat ward. There's a warding scroll here. There's a big wax seal pressed where the door is closed, almost like a papyrus scroll pressed to the wax. Mm-hmm. And I think it says in... I don't know what the Concordat Latin, right? Like you would recognize it as like a high speech. It declares by the order of the Hierophant, may no living being cross this threshold. And this body is kind of slumped, I think, in the door jamb. And this body has a breathing mask where the other two did not. And I think it's like the pull in my head is like in Star Wars when they get out of the Millennium Falcon and they're like in that thing. Like it's not a whole face mask thing. It's basically like a small rebreather that's connected to a little metal oxygen tank. And this body has the same kind of white ceramic breastplate. I think it bears an imprint here that would signify some kind of rank.
Sorry about your Hierophant, but I'm different. I don't actually know if we want to directly go in, but Bracco kind of levels the gun at the seal. Like, do we go in? Do we open it? Is there a handle?
I think Argo reaches away and tears away the seal, right?
Smarter than just blowing it away, but
Yeah.
We each have our own ways of getting through doors.
And
I think in that moment we get the little, like, you know, when you're playing a role-playing game where it's like your companion like that.
Yeah.
You know? Alice like that.
So I think snatching the, scroll down and wadding it up, right? Like with the kind of edge of your knife, you can probably pop the wax seal off of this thing. I think that the wax kind of crumbles away and the door lurches open. In this room in front of you, I think, I'd say this is darker than the kind of stone we saw on the outside. It's a wide, oval-shaped room with a seeming boulder of kind of slate gray, and a vertical seam rises on this boulder. And this erratic outcropping, I think it's an angular boulder here, but above it hovers a perfectly smooth sphere of white stone. And this white stone, maybe 2 feet wide, hovers above this, and there's kind of a soft lighting from above. I think we can see a slow rotation of like a big fan blade, right, set into the ceiling. And this light filters from above, illuminating this kind of boulder on a dais. And surrounding it, flames lick from candle wicks burning in the odd stillness of this interior chamber. And in a wide semicircle around this boulder and dais are 100 or more of these candles burning. The air that wafts from this room is thick with incense as machines faintly whir and click as thaumaturgical engines cycling through warding protocols to suppress latent fundamental fields, cabling running from the dais further out towards the edges of the room. And as your eyes adjust to the dim light, you can see more bodies of this ceramic white plate slumped near the far wall. The sphere above hangs completely motionless, while wafts of this stale recycled air burn slowly in a ritual of purification. Candle wax and seals bearing the imposing symbol and the insignia of a Concordat Justicar on the scrolls draped from the spear's perch above this ritual circle. A similar ward cycler is fitted to the door beyond. And I think what you have walked into here is some sort of artifact of the Aeonian, which looks to have been attempted to be worked into some kind of a Concordat warding protocol. I think, Argo, you would recognize this as the work of a Justicar and powerful thaumaturge.
Yikes.